Hey there, and welcome back to another transit report from Sparky Spirit. My name is Danielle, and I'm the astrological counselor behind Sparky Spirit Astrology. And today we are talking about Valentine's Day. Well, more so actually a transit that is happening really this entire next week, starting today, the day that I'm sharing this video. There is an alignment happening between Mars, Venus, and Pluto this week. So I am going to talk about this collective frequency that is coming from this alignment in our sky. And it just so happens to coincide with Valentine's Day, a nationally recognized day of love. And of course, fittingly, we have Mars and Venus in the mix here, masculine and feminine dynamics. And so in this transit report, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the very interesting reflections and dynamics of not only Mars and Venus, but also Pluto, and how this really correlates with power dynamics. That's the main theme that I will be talking about today, specifically in relation to these planets and what the opportunity is here for you this coming week with this channel opening up, if you will, with this alignment of the planets. So before I go further, there's just a couple pieces of information I would like to share about myself personally as an astrologer. I practice what is called true sidereal astrology. It is different than mainstream astrology in a couple ways. So sometimes you will hear information that is different from me than what else is out there, and it really boils down to this approach that I use called true sidereal astrology. So if you are curious to learn more about that, it's basically a system that uses the actual sky and the constellations as we know them today. Versus mainstream astrology is based off of a 2,000-year-old calendar that has just a different basis. So there's actually a video link in the description below if you want to learn more about this. But yeah, that little bit about me as an astrologer. And then second, I actually want to take a moment to talk about transits just a little bit more, and the significance and like what we're really doing in astrology looking at transits, because it brings up this really interesting concept of being able to predict things, which is something I've personally been like against energetically for a while, where I had kind of just an issue with this layer of astrology, the fact that we were predicting, or that astrologers out there were predicting things that could happen or would happen, and oddly enough though, that these predictions often, or there's been enough correlation between things actually happening, that is just an interesting facet, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, because when you understand what we're doing here, and I say we as an astrologers are reporting on transits, is there is a layer of prediction to this energy. And there, I want to describe this because I will never know, and nor do I personally believe, and this is a belief, we can predict the future. I think the ever-present moment is always unfolding without us ever necessarily knowing what we're going to consciously choose to do with the energy available. And so I kind of actually want to touch on this in terms of like transits in a way are like the seasons. It's like we can predict that spring is coming again, right? Like we can predict that like winter is coming again, and we're gonna have this like summer solstice. Like there are these cycles that we are connected to. Everything's always connected, right? Everything's vibration and frequency at the end of the day. So we are a web of connected energy. And so in the same way that we can predict that spring is going to come again, so can we predict where these cycles are. In astrology, taking it on a planetary level, we can predict when Mars and Venus are going to be aligned again. And this time with where Pluto is currently located in the sky. And so that's something that we really can predict. However, there's this other layer with transits that is tied to your conscious awareness and your choice, your free will, if you will. And I say like that because there's actually a really fascinating debate about whether or not we even have free will or if it's like an illusion. And I'm not going to get into that in this video, but I will never know what you consciously choose to do with this transit energy, but I can know the season, that almost like the season that we are going into, in terms of the cosmic weather. This prediction on the channels and the frequency alignment and what kind of atmosphere that might create for us, which could possibly lead us down paths of certain expressions and certain experiences more so than other times of the year, the cycles of the planets. And so that's what we're doing with this transit information. And I really feel passionate about sharing this because when you are consciously aware of a channel opening up, and that's how I'm going to describe this, Mars, Venus, Pluto alignment in the sky, there's an open channel, the same frequency match between Mars, Venus, and Pluto this upcoming week. And so now interpreting that cycle, this cycle that we can predict, okay, how does that translate into our human experience? And when you know to look for these things, you can navigate the current and the weather, the cosmic weather, to create an experience that you actually desire to have. And the reason I say it for this transit specifically is because there's many different ways that this energy could show up. However, it does have the makings for reactivity, a lot of passion, anger, resent, or even violence, because Pluto and Mars are in the mix. So if we are aware that these are kind of some of the ingredients that are maybe floating around, we can choose to really be aware of these things like our own reactivity or our own passion, and take extra care in how we share it with our partners. And so I'm going to describe just like a little bit about heading into the transit itself. Now I'm going to describe a little bit about Mars and Venus and Pluto, what we see actually reflected in our sky from these planets, celestial bodies, and then I'm going to get into the interpretation, the invitation for this cosmic time and how this can help us grow and heal and self-actualize to become like the biggest, brightest, boldest versions of ourselves, where we're really true to our hearts and who we are. So yeah, Mars, Venus, and Pluto. There's some interesting similarities between these three, and actually I'm gonna say 4 bodies in the sky. But starting with Mars and Venus, like these two are the quintessential representation of the masculine, feminine energies in us. And I do like to share Mars and Venus. They are the closest bodies to us in terms of in the solar system, where the Earth is located from the sun. Venus is that first planet orbiting inside of our orbit. Venus is on the inside, one planet closer to the sun than us. And then Mars is the first planet on the outside. So in terms of orbital paths and all that jazz, like we are closest to Mars and Venus. Venus, I like to say, is calling us inward. Venus is this inward operating energy, as we see reflected in Venus being inside of our orbit. There's this internal process that Venus is connected to, calling us into pleasure, really that receiving energy that we have, that really the feminine is made for. And I actually will say that there's a lot of different words for masculine and feminine energy, and it's not and I'm not really speaking about these in a gender way, more so in a functional way. And so there's other words for this, like polarized dynamic, but I'll continue using masculine, feminine. So feminine being our ability to receive, And honestly, pleasure. I really correlate Venus with our pleasure function. Is it painful or is it pleasurable? And where is that? And how do we react to these types of things, pain and pleasure? And then Mars, Mars energy comes in the mix with the feminine in terms of how are we aroused? That's really what I correlate Mars with, being this outer orbiting energy right outside of our kind of our physical body, which I correlate with being, because we're here on the Earth, the densest planet in the solar system. I believe that's part of why we experience 3D reality here, as being a human on Earth. Anyways, but Mars is this arousal. How do we move our bodies in response to, is it painful or pleasurable? What we receive, is it making us feel good or bad? And then how do we respond to that energy? Is our inward dynamic, which I want to talk about with the Mars and masculine, feminine energies. That's really like something that we have inside of ourselves, a partnership with ourselves on the masculine and feminine. So I'll describe that a little bit more after talking about these planets. But yeah, Mars and Venus, in there, a correlation with this masculine and feminine energy, the give and the take, really illustrate and introduce this idea of power dynamics in all of our lives, and how power dynamics are really everywhere. Every relationship actually has a power dynamic. And so I want to dive into that. And then Pluto is the next part of this, which is, I love sharing this information about Pluto because I think it just opens up an entire new door to what this dwarf planet is revealing. And anyways, it's about Pluto's moon, Chiron. It's interesting we consider Pluto kind of like this solo, well it is, a solo dwarf planet, but actually in astronomy, Pluto's moon, Chiron, is also actually, they're kind of considered a duo dwarf planet, but no one ever talks about Chiron. And just to get a little background information, Chiron, well, first Greek, so a little Greek mythology here. Pluto is originally represented by Hades in Greek mythology, the god of the underworld. Also correlated with the death tarot card, Pluto. And so likewise, Pluto represents this, the diving into the shadow, these darker elements of our human experience. But what it ultimately shows is our connection to other sources of energy, which again, we'll talk about a little bit more in the power dynamics, the invitation that this transit's offering you. But Chiron in Greek mythology was the ferryman into the underworld. So Hades being the actual god of the underworld, Chiron was the figure that you would get on Chiron's boat and it's the descent into the underworld, right? And don't we ever always hear about those stories, like the descent into the underworld? And of course, sometimes there's these okay, we're actually in the underworld, but there really is this dynamic duo with Chiron and Pluto, this ushering into the underworld, and then quite honestly, the rebirth that Pluto represents itself. It feels like death in a way. This concept of Pluto, it brings up this question of being forced to do something, like die. We don't have control over that, feeling out of control of something, of another force, this very Plutonian concept. And quite honestly, it's this ushering, it's the death and then the rebirth. We do see this kind of dynamic duo in just what Pluto represents. And for me, it's always this hidden character, Chiron, that's operating with Pluto every given moment. And fascinating, in astronomy, in our sky, Chiron is about half, almost exactly half of the size of Pluto. And this is I don't want to say the largest, but I would say maybe one of the largest proportions that a planet has with one of its moons. And because of this large size proportion and distribution, Chiron actually moves, as Chiron is orbiting around Pluto, its gravitational pull is so significant that it actually causes Pluto to do a little orbit as well. So Pluto's not stationary, like, on its axis, I should say. Like the Earth, we're on an axis and we rotate around that axis. Our moon is not large enough in size to cause our orbit to shift, but for Pluto and Chiron, that is the case. And they always see the same face of each other. Pluto never sees the other side of Chiron, and Chiron never sees the other side of Pluto, if these planets were to have eyes. And there is symbolism in this for me, this reflection of needing a partner, how relationship shows us our shadow. Going into relationships, romantic and otherwise, that is what helps us see our own shadow by what is reflected back to us from this other party, this other person that we are in relationship with. And so with Pluto and Chiron, we also see this dynamic of relationship of two forces that impact each other to such a degree that you can't ignore the other force. There's a power dynamic here, just in how we see their orbits. And so all of these planets are going to be aligning over the course of this next week. And this is going to bring in, Pluto bringing in this subconscious, what we're not really seeing. And this is what I think Chiron really represents, the fact that no one talks about Chiron. Represents this, what's happening, what's operating behind the scenes. Like, we're just looking at Pluto, but this whole time there's been this other force causing Pluto to move, and it's like, what's operating underneath the scenes here. And this kind of really segues us into the invitation we have this next week with this transit, and it really is to dive into those things that have been operating below the surface for us, that we maybe haven't wanted to share with a partner, have felt maybe like we don't deserve something, like a desire that we've had for so long, but we haven't ever shared it because we don't think we're gonna get it, or whatever this is. It's a really an opportunity for deep, vulnerable, intimate connections. And it does not just have to be with a lover. Obviously, Valentine's Day, Mars and Venus, masculine and feminine, there's gonna be a lot of relationship stuff happening. But this is not just around your partner in the romantic sense, but also work relationships, and this is where my practice of astrology is a bit different than other mainstream astrology. I read by constellation, and so this transit is taking place on the Sagittarius Capricorn cusp. And this does pull in business for me. I do see individuals having some conversations with coworkers or managers, or these relationships, and diving into what maybe has been pain points or also been working really well. I can see us really connecting in the work atmosphere, in a deeper way. And so if you are someone who is maybe currently experiencing conflict in the workplace, maybe there's just some people around that are just, whatever it might be, rocking the boat. Maybe you're really tired of that one manager doing whatever, whatever these are, the invitation for you is to find, the courage, and also just the awareness to honestly look at things and say, this has not been working for me. This has been causing me pain and suffering. And I desire something different. And all of these components are in this theme of power dynamics, which when I say the word power dynamics, I think a lot of people might get a negative connotation from that. Oh gosh, who's trying to who wants power over who, But I just think power dynamics are a fundamental part of our world, and actually something that can bring us a lot of joy and pleasure. Like romance for me is power dynamics, and flirting. And so I want to talk about desire for a moment, and desire, and specifically Venus being the feminine. And desire, we only feel desire when we lack something. And so if you are desiring something in your life, that's like kind of what I want. Okay, I'm lacking this thing. That is why I am seeking it outside of myself. Like human connection, this desire for connection with each other. Like that is something you have to reach outside of yourself to connect with another force in order to receive. And so this dynamic naturally pulls us out of ourself to partner with another force, generally another person. When I say another force, because it's not always a person, it could be like a larger organization, or just like money systems, like taxes kind of fall into this Pluto realm of like, we all have to pay our taxes. That's like a force that we we should pay our taxes. I should say, people don't, I'm sure. But anyway, so it could be something other than just another person. But for this sake, when you desire something and someone else in your life has the ability to give it to you, they have the power in this situation. And like, quite honestly, this is just can be as simple as you reaching out to have a conversation with one of your best friends because you need to decompress. You desire to share an experience you had and to have them listen to you. And that requires you reaching outside of yourself to your best friend and saying like, hey, I really need to process this thing that happened in my life. And your friend has the power to give that to you or not. And that's where pain and pleasure kind of comes into this. When this external force decides to meet your request, well, now we have pleasure. But when we are rejected, when we are denied something, a desire that we have, well, that's where it's painful. We experience pain and suffering. And so just tune into this week, pain and pleasure for you. What's painful? And like I'm going to use a real example in my life. And this is where the power dynamics can really come in, like one-on-one work with yourself. Like, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm sitting over here single this Valentine's Day, dating myself. Like I'm going to work with this power dynamics inside of me, because there's a lot of the times where we desire something and in actuality, we're refusing to give it to ourselves. And this example of like actually very timely in the work environment for me. I have a certain client that I've had for a long time, and it's been outside of my astrology work and business. This has been a past client in a different industry. And anyways, I realized recently that I'm like, I actually don't like this. I actually don't like this. This is not fulfilling my heart. I do not feel pleasure. It's actually really frustrating and painful for me to stay in this role. I have to like drag my energy out of me to do the tasks, and I just feel like stressed and anxious when I think about the work that needs to be done. And I'm like, wow, this isn't really an enjoyable experience for me. And it's funny how we sometimes, and how long I had been telling myself that I need to stay there. I've been forcing myself to stay in a painful situation because for whatever reason, like fill over the belief, I need the money, they need me. That's a one to pick out for sure. Someone else needing you for some role that is playing out, and like I can't leave because they need me. That has kept me in a unpleasurable situation for so long. And like kind of let's just like pick this apart real quick. Staying in a situation where you actually don't have pleasure, you're not getting pleasure, and telling yourself, and I should say, life is not all about pleasure. Of course, there's going to be hard situations and things that are not fun to do and painful. That was always going to be there. But life can be so much more pleasurable then we allow it to be. And I personally believe a lot of that is us forcing ourselves to stay in challenging situations and challenging partnerships, whether that be at a job or in a romantic partnership, even in our family relationships, or our friendships. All of these situations we force ourselves. That's a very Plutonian concept, to feel out of control, like you don't have control over whether or not you can stay in this relationship. Some other thing is dictating whether or not you can stay. Well, I really encourage you, these like power struggles that we have with ourselves over this part of me that's been asking for a while, be like, God, I really can't wait to be done with these responsibilities and tasks. Like, I actually want to do this. I want to do astrology. I want to do more of this in my writing and my blogging, and this is where the pleasure is for me. And here I was just denying myself that. Like, I had something that I could give myself. And for so long, I was not doing that. Because of whatever reason, I felt like other people were more important than myself. However, I'm not helping anyone, and I haven't been helping anyone, staying in that role, and like kind of feeling the drudgery, the energy, the drudgery, versus like putting your energy in an area where it's like so much fun and so authentic and so like lights you up. That's where we serve the most. When we stay in relationships that are aligned, and quite honestly, where we get to dance with our partners over fight with them. And so I really believe that this transit is going to bring up opportunities to dance or fight. And I really, really invite you to dance with your partners. And it all starts with like kind of tuning into pleasure and desire. What are you desiring in your life right now? Have you shared that with your partner? I mean, in some situations, maybe like depending if it's like a work scenario or like, but we could take it on like a romantic relationship level. Like, let's just say that you have such a large desire to do acro yoga with your partner. That's like just a desire, like, oh, like I want to go and I want to do this thing with you and experience it with you, but you haven't shared that with them because you think they're going to reject you. You think they're going to think you're stupid or not meet your desire. That keeps us from asking at all. And that keeps that pleasure from our life. And like, that's the invitation. I would want us all to choose pleasure, and to dance, not to fight, which means sometimes honestly disengaging from the partners that just want to fight with you. There are forces and partners where it's like they don't want to dance, and we co-create it together. And so I invite you to honestly look at those relationships and say, has this actually been causing more harm than good? Because it's our responsibility to align ourselves with partners that are going to meet us where we're at. And I think a lot of times relationships can run their course and we stay because of whatever reason we tell ourselves we need to, that they need us. But in actuality, like, we really actually have the power and the wherewithal, and it's actually in service for everyone to walk away from these misaligned relationships and find greater alignment. It just takes a lot of courage and a lot of faith in yourself, and I am here for it. So that is just a little forecast and invitation for this transit coming up. And if you are, there's like a lot of different ways that this information can apply to you specifically. It depends on where Pluto's at in your chart, Mars and Venus. If any of them were in a relationship with each other when you were born, that is going to, like, what sign they were in, what house position. All of these things impact, like, specifically how I would expect this to show up for you. And so if you're in a place where you like really want to capitalize on this invitation to find greater connection and alignment in your partnerships, to dance more than fight, or learn how to change a fight into a dance, and what dynamics, what energy patterns are you working with? I invite you to do a one-on-one session with me, or purchase a recording, a personal recording. Either of those are an option where I can give you more specific information on how to navigate this time for your growth, healing, and self-actualization, so you can become a more healthy, aligned person with your heart, and also all the cosmic cycles happening around us all the time. So beautiful. The links are in the description below. And I do have another exciting transit taking place next week that I'll be reporting on. So if you enjoy this type of content, I invite you to subscribe to my channel so you can stay updated, or also join my email list. That's really where I share any new workshops I'm doing, any specials on like sessions, and share, actually I write blogs and whatnot for this topic as well. So there's a link for the blog in the description. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I invite you to share anything that resonates with you in the comments below. I really enjoy seeing that. So, all right, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.